And it was the soft glow of electric sex. So, with that in mind, when you pose with the leg lamp, show it the respect it deserves by placing your hands lovingly on the lamp. Now, as I said, the house was built in 1895, but even for me, that's ancient history. So I'm going to skip a whole bunch of decades and move into the early 60s. And Bob Clark, our director, is on his way to pick up a date. And he's listening to the radio, and he's listening to one Gene Shepard. Gene is reading excerpts from his book, In God We Trust, All Others Pay Cash. He's talking about his childhood in Hammond, Indiana. He's talking about the Bumpus Hounds and Scut Farkus and the BB gun and his little brother Randy. Now, for all intents and purposes, Gene Shepard is Ralphie. His little brother did not get an alias. Now, Bob gets so wrapped up in these stories, he forgets to pick up the date. But it does plant a seed in his mind that he can't escape. Now, by the early 80s, Bob is a director of, shall we say, B-class horror movies. It's only because I've never heard of C or D. These are movies with titles such as Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things, Black Christmas. And then Bob hits it big with a movie we owe a great deal to, because without this movie, A Christmas Story might not have been made. That movie was Porky's. Now immediately MGM goes, Bob, you finally gave us a hit. We need Porky's too. Now Bob agrees, but he says, I do have this other little project I'd like to tackle first. And as the story goes, he and Gene Shepard have been working on and off for about 10 years on the screenplay for A Christmas Story. They present the idea to MGM. And to be kind, let's just say that MGM was mildly amused. This guy who's done these horror flicks and Porky's now proposing A Christmas Story. Well, to placate Bob, and truly to grease the skids for Porky's too, they give Bob the grand sum of $3.25 million. Now, that's a lot for an individual. That is not a lot for a movie. And Bob is off to find a site. Now, fortunately for us, and sadly for Hammond, Indiana, they decide that Hammond had become too modernized. And Bob has this seemingly brilliant idea. He sends out hundreds of letters to department stores across the Midwest. And in this letter, he states he'll film in their store from January through March. He'll film after hours when they're typically stocking and cleaning. Leave all your Christmas decorations up. And, oh, by the way, I'm going to construct a 30-foot Santa's Mountain in the middle of your store. Now, predictably, hundreds of refusals later, one store, a family-run business by the name of Higbee's in downtown Cleveland, goes, you know, that sounds like that could be fun. And in fact, if you do it here, we'll have the city of Cleveland leave all their decorations up, and that'll play into your parade scene. So he's got his downtown site. He needs a home somewhere close by. And this house fit the bill on a number of levels. First off, you've got that T intersection outside. Gives him traffic control. An empty lot next door for cast crew, trailers, and setups. The porch lends itself beautifully to his delivery scene, and the backdrop was exactly what he was looking for. At that point in time, it was J&L Steel. Today, that's ArcelorMittal, still an active steel mill. So it was that series of events that led up to this home being originally chosen. We now move on to casting. Melinda Dillon, a very accomplished actress. Numerous Tony Awards for her stage work, 2 Academy Award nominations for screen. One of those was Close Encounters of a Third Kind. The other was opposite Paul Newman in Absence of Malice. Another movie that she did opposite Paul that hockey fans are familiar with was Slapshot. She was also the mother in Harry and the Hendersons. She's offered the role and accepts. Hundreds of children auditioned for Randy and Ralphie. Ian Petrella, who was 8 years old at the time, won it on the basis of his giggle. And when he screen tested with the mashed potatoes on his face, it was a done deal. Now, there was a bone of contention on the Ralphie role. Schwartz, the kid who played Flick, thought he had the inside track for the role. He had played opposite Jackie Gleason and Richard Pryor in The Toy. They had to explain to Schwartz that, you know, it's not the size of the role. You'll always be known as that kid who got his tongue stuck to the pole. And as events played out, that's pretty much what he's noted for. They instead went with Peter Billingsley, whose third cousin was Barbara Billingsley of Leave It to Beaver fame. At that point in time, he was a veteran of some 200 TV commercials, most notably Messy Marvin and the M&M's commercials. Today, he is a very successful producer-director in Hollywood. Now, MGM enters into our scenario once again, and they go to Bob and go, "You don't have a name. You need a star to carry this movie." And they had a suggestion. That suggestion was Jack Nicholson. Now, yeah, it gets worse. Jack had just finished The Shining. So let's go from Red Rum to Red Ryder. Let's think about Randy in the cupboard. Daddy's gonna kill Ralphie. But the real crux of that matter came down to Jack's non-negotiable fee. And at that point in time, it was $5 million per movie. Well, that exceeds the entire budget. They opt instead for Darren McGavin of Kolchak the Night Stalker TV series and some 300 other movie and TV credits to his resume. I think we can all pretty much agree, though, he nailed this part. And no small feat. Keep in mind, he invented his own language to maintain that PG rating. So now we get back to MGM. And keep in mind, they had no faith whatsoever in this movie. The only thing they wanted out of it was for Bob to do Porky's 2. They put no advertising money behind it. They opened it up in fewer than 900 theaters nationwide. The critics, by the way, hated the movie. You'll see some of those reviews in the museum. The movie lasts a little over 3 weeks, and we figure gone and forgotten, except for one very astute and, as it turns out, lucky businessman. A gentleman by the name of Ted Turner. He's getting his fledgling TV stations off the ground, and he buys a very large block of movies from MGM, and among those was A Christmas Story. And right from the start, his intent was to run the marathon, to enable his employees to have Christmas Eve and Christmas off. Now, when I say that Ted was lucky, does a little homework, makes an amazing discovery. None of the actors or writers had licensing or royalty agreements attached to this film. The film today is owned in its entirety by Turner Entertainment. Now, this is also about the time that my boss, Brian Jones, falls in love with the movie. Brian, a graduate of Annapolis. And around about 2004, he discovers that this home is being auctioned on eBay for an opening bid price of $90,000. Doesn't sound like much until you come to the realization that homes in this particular neighborhood at that time were going from between $20,000 to $40,000. And there were not a lot of takers at those prices. So what does Brian do? Well, sight unseen, calls the guy up and goes, "Tell you what, take it off the market today. I'll give you $150,000 for the house." Now, I'm quite certain, unless the guy passed out, he said sold. Brian makes his way to Cleveland, gets to the house. The porch is in disrepair, landscaping's a disaster, it's covered in vinyl siding. He knows that has to come down, but he goes, maybe we can make a go of this. Opens the door, and here's the I Love Lucy moment of all time. Because when he did, he had to have said, "I got lots of splaining to do." The house was about a month from being condemned and torn down. It was essentially gutted down to the stud walls, no copper, no wiring. Now this is where I do have to give a lot of credit to his wife, because mine would have killed me. "You bought what? Where? How much?" Well, they don't react in this manner. They spend the next 2 years going frame by frame through the movie. Another $240,000 to put it into the shape you see it today. That is a testament to one, having a dream, more importantly, following through on those dreams. Now, a quick word about movie making and residential homes. They often